Discover Help presents Stress-Free Living with Ray Samich and Mr. Stress-Free Ratanjit S. Sandhi. This audio program is an unscripted and unrehearsed conversation between Ray and Ratanjit. It is shared with you in hope of adding value to your life. We encourage you to listen to this program in its entirety to receive the full impact of its message. Sit back, relax, open your heart, mind, and soul to this edition of Stress-Free Living.
Welcome to Stress-Free Living. Thank you so much for being with us today. I'm Ray Samich, and I'd like to introduce everybody to my longtime radio colleague, co-host, and my dear spiritual brother, Ratanjit Sandhi. Ratanjit, how are you today?
Wonderful, Ray. How are you?
Excellent. Thank you. Surrounded here as we are looking at our computer screens at a number of wonderful guests that have joined us that are part of our Zoom audience. And we can't see the faces of our radio audience or our YouTube or our internet audience, but we know you're out there too, and we value each of you, and we hope that we are adding value to your life as well. Ratanjit, today is a kind of a follow-up, part two of the show that we did last week. For those of our audience that were part of that, listened or watched that show, we talked about, should we just give up? Life can be so hard and so stress-filled and so depressing, and sometimes, and there's just so much around us that is out of our control. Should we just give up? And you came up, over the course of that conversation with the reality that if we live in the moment, if we don't worry about what could have or should have happened, if we don't worry about what might happen tomorrow, then we can overcome whatever is around us, and we should never give up. Is that a fair, real quick summary of what we talked about last week?
Yeah, it's part of it, and it has to be understood what that means, because until we fully comprehend that and dissect it and live in detail in the present, it's all a talk.
Yeah. And I know there's more. I really summarize it in 10 words instead of the whole 60-minute show, but
yeah,
that was the essence of it. But then I got to thinking over the course of the week, as good as that advice was, and it was very powerful and very helpful, but even if you live in the moment, it can be very challenging. Even if I'm not worried about the future and don't dwell on regretting the past, the moment is still tough. I'm happy today. I'm happy in this moment. And then I get news that somebody that I love is sick, or I get instantaneous news that I got a bill in the mail because something happened that I didn't expect, and it's going to cost me a lot of money now that I don't have. Or I get fired in the moment, and I thought I was good. I thought my job was secure, and somehow there's a big layoff, and so I got laid off today. In the moment, okay, life can still be filled with stress, disappointment, anger, whatever it is in the moment that really happens that is very unpleasant. How do I cope with that? Even living in the moment, how can I make life less hard, even if I'm trying to live just for today?
Well, the basic essence of life is that all our businesses are formed by solving a problem. You have a product, you have an idea, you have something which solves a problem, otherwise it is inundating us. So whenever we confront a problem or a situation, it allows us, okay, how do we find the solution of this problem? And once you engage your creativity in solving that problem, and then initially, before you can solve that problem, you have to accept it. You have to take that as a gift, which is given to you. It's wrapped in a rag. If a diamond is wrapped in a dirty rag, it is still a diamond, right? So
Yes.
once you unveil the dirty wrap and find the diamond in it, we do not add value. So ultimately, everything which happens to us, we have to accept it as a gift. And we have to understand that nature has given us a gift, whether it is we are fired from the job, or it is a ailment, or it is somebody, a friend of yours who is in trouble, or the society is falling apart, or whatever the reason, whatever is the bad news. It is all, you look around, there is plenty of bad news. So plenty of opportunities to make those things better. And all those opportunities can give you enormous amount of satisfaction, gratification, and wealth if you are able to solve those problems. Right?
I can't disagree with you at all. And certainly when you talk about businesses, you're right on. I mean, the business that finds a solution to somebody else's problem, whether they know or don't know it is a problem. So many of the inventions create a solution to a problem that people didn't realize they had. We were perfectly content with the old phones, and for anybody probably over, I don't know, over 40, they would understand what I mean. If they're under 40, they probably don't even understand, but all phones used to be connected in your home. They were all attached to a wire that led to an outlet somewhere and either hung on the phone or sat on a table. You never thought that phone would ever become wireless. And the people that invented the wireless introduced and solved a problem we didn't even know we had. Suddenly now we realize, wow, yeah, we are chained down, and this wireless phone lets us become mobile with it. So whether it's a problem we know or a problem we don't know, business thrives on solving that problem. But for human beings, it's different. It's not a thing that just happens in a business environment. It happens in my heart. It happens in my head. It happens in my soul if it's deep enough. If I get the terrible news that my father died, it's crushing. How do you say that's an opportunity? How do you say that I accept that as a good thing when it's life changing to me in the moment? It's something that is just very hard to accept.
Well, you find the reason why you lost a loved one. Is it because of a nasty disease, or you remember that institution, a non-profit entity is called MADD, MADD, Mothers
Yeah.
Against Drunk Driver. So this mother, who was basically a stay-home mother, she lost her child through this accident, which was the driver was drunk. So instead of getting mad and getting sorry, she started a organization which has passed so many laws. Now there are less people dying out of drunk driving than when laws were not passed. So she made a difference to the society. One can say, but she still lost her son or her daughter. Basically, when it is each one of us have a limited life, we have to sooner or later leave this earth. So we are looking for a temporary stay on this earth. So nothing is permanent. You are basically sent here to add highest value to this society, and you are going to get these opportunities wrapped up in problems. So look at uh, if there is a maintenance guy in the company, so all the calls that maintenance person receives are the problems. So this thing is not working, that thing is not working. So his job is basically based on solving the problem. So our purpose of life, we are sent here for a temporary time, and we don't know that time. And all our relationship, when we call them blood relationship, all our relatives are blood relatives. But the closest person who is most close to us is not even blood relative, your spouse. So a relationship with love and affection is the deepest relationship which you can form with everyone, and not necessarily, once you add value, once you consider everyone as part of you and add value, you never have a person who is absence of love. Loneliness is not because the absence of loved one around you. Loneliness only is because of absence of love within you. So once you bring that love within you, you do not discriminate, you become distributor of love. By sharing the love is the biggest joy you have. We are always looking for somebody is not loving me, but we can love somebody unconditional, and it is a beautiful feeling. And in the process of loving, we convert that love into a verb, and which means instead of just saying that I love you, you always add the highest value, you serve them. Love, when it becomes a verb, it is taking an action to serve others. So no matter what circumstances you are in, good or bad, you continuously practice these conditions, right?
You have just given me so many different branches of the tree to talk about. Some beautiful words there that you just spoke. I want to go back to the idea of a loss of a loved one, because I think if we talk about any disappointments that you say make life hard, anything else pales in comparison to the death of somebody. I mean, we know in our hearts we can overcome a loss of a job, or we can figure out a way to pay a bill, or we can find a place to live if we lose our home, or whatever it is. We know that we'll find a solution, but the finality of the loss of a loved one is real, and it's unchangeable. It's like, okay, that person is gone, and nothing that I can possibly do on earth is going to change that. So let's dwell a little bit on that as the ultimate. Disappointment is a not strong enough word, but you get the idea. The ultimate shock that could take place in any given moment when I'm trying to live in the moment, and then a loved one dies. Okay. If we can cope with that, then I think we can learn to cope with anything in the moment, is what I'm trying to say. So I think you've given something very empowering in terms of coping with that. And that is to have the underlying knowledge that that person, whoever it is going to go anyway, because nobody lives forever. And it reminds me that I'm not going to live forever either. So whether that person tragically died as a child, which is every parent's fear, nightmare, or whether they lived to be 106, they know there is going to be an end to it. Okay. So is the secret to do something with the point of why they passed, to get on that, have that build momentum for us, so that we, if they did die young, if they did die tragically before the normal life expectations, that we are supposed to use that as a wake-up call to be motivated? Do you think that's why the divine sends those things into our life, to inspire, motivate us to make a difference with that example? Why do you think God allows those things to happen?
Well, before I can answer that question in a simple language, consider your loved one who is traveling abroad and runs into a massive accident, and it completely destroyed his or her face. And although he was going to live with, so this new technology, doctors ended up transplanting a face. And now when he or she comes back, you cannot recognize him. It's a different face. The old face has died. And now there is another side of this. If you fall in love with a person, shell, the outer body is a temporary housing for us when we are visiting this earth. So when we die, we basically let the outer dressing, the human body, is not available to us. So it's like somebody ruined your suit and you ended up throwing that away and getting a new suit. So the real you, which is the power which enlivens you, never dies. So once you understand, once you begin to see others, even your loved one, not just the human body, not just the face, but you recognize who they really are. They are the power which enlivens them. It is the same power which enlivens you. It is the same electricity which lightens so many bulbs. So bulb, when it is cannot be lit, you throw it away. But that power which enlivens the light bulb is always there. It is always going to be there. So once you understand that you are not falling in love with the outer shell, because in an accident that face can be replaced and you will have a different face. And similarly, the human body would be replaced. You will have a different outer shell. You fall in love with the real person, which is the power, which is enlivening power, universal power, right?
So that is very reassuring in that scenario, to know that that person really isn't gone. The real person will live forever because it's part of the divine one. And so we're still connected forever. So the reality is, I didn't lose, God forbid, my son. I didn't lose, God forbid, my spouse. You know, I didn't lose my best friend, whatever it might be. That person, I'm sorry, that spiritual being will be there forever. The real person that I loved or loved is there forever. So that's extremely empowering and comforting and reassuring and real. But I miss, in those scenarios, I miss that face. I miss, and more importantly than the face, because the face in your example, we could come to love the new face because of the gestures that that face makes. We could still love the way that person raises their eyebrows at us, or tosses their hair, or whatever those silly gestures are that make that human person who they are. So we could still fall in love with that person even if they have a different face, because we know that that's still the same person. So we miss those things when they're gone. We miss the way they talk to us. We miss the way they listen to us. We miss the way we engaged in conversation and in joyful moments. So the reassurance of the oneness ultimately is the key, but we still have to cope with the loss, right? We still have to cope with missing certain aspects of that person, and the knowledge, ultimate knowledge, that those things that we miss are never going to come back.
Yeah, I think we should take a break, and I'll answer that question after the break.
Okay, I know you don't need the 90 seconds to think about it, but I need it to regroup here. 90 seconds for us to take a break and let you know who is sponsoring this program for us, which we are grateful for. And it gives us a chance to interact with our Zoom audience, which we always invite you to be a part of as well. If you'd like to be a part of this audience, so we can engage before, during, and after the show with you and get your feedback and input on a show, we'd love to have you join us with that. You can catch that means of doing that by way of our YouTube channel. Go out to Stress Free Living Radio on YouTube, and you'll find out how you can become a part of our Zoom audience. I will hopefully learn how to talk a little bit better when we come back in just a moment. All right, everybody, we've got our 90 seconds here. Please feel free to join us.
Professor Param, any comments?
Welcome, everybody.
Well, in my experience, I look back at those moments that have filled me with a grief and sadness that is completely overpowering. And I had a friend guide me through a loss experience some time back. And it revealed something very luminous to me, which is we have a natural instinct to tell ourselves, we shouldn't be sad. I shouldn't be sad. I think part of why we find the loss so unbearable is because we try to fight off the sadness. When I had somebody very close die on me, I was helped by this friend to just stay in the sadness, to stay with the sadness, to accept the sadness, to lower myself fully into the well of the sadness, and to marinate in it with no distractions, not trying to make myself feel better, not trying to even reassure myself that the sadness will go away. Just embracing the sadness in its totality. And at the end of the 3 months, I have to say that I really emerged fundamentally transformed at some level. Firstly, becoming way more empathetic towards others, because I know that when people would suffer losses, I would say, I feel terrible for you, but I really wouldn't. I would just be saying those words. But I developed a deeper capacity to be empathetic, and it's certainly a greater immunity to loss and grief. So I think the complete acceptance of that sadness and immersion in grief and sadness is something that makes a difference.
We are back on Stress Free Living. Ratanjit and Ray, yours truly, Ray Samich, with you. And we are so delighted that you have joined us here today. Thank you for being a part of our program. And thanks to our wonderful Zoom guests. We get so inspired by their comments and even by their questions during this program, as we just heard from one of our wonderful guests there during this break. Ratanjit, I want to hear your take first, and then I do want to bring up what one of our guests just added in terms of how do we cope with that. So what were you going to say before we took the break there, when I had said, how do we overcome that loss of the human spacesuit, if you will, that we miss, those aspects of that person that we no longer can enjoy?
You know, I remember when we moved from a small apartment into the first house we bought here in Chagrin Falls. My daughter was 7 years old, and she was very upset because that apartment was so hers, and
Yeah.
the new house, although it's bigger and she had her own room and her everything, but she was very upset for a long time. So similarly, we human beings get used to certain conditions, and they end up developing us into a habitual acquaintance with that situation. And it is, it's like smoking. Everybody knows that this is bad for you. But a chain smoker will always want to have the urge to smoke. So we live not by our knowledge, we live by our habits. And once we form the habit of having somebody around us in a particular form, is a human suit or human uniform, it's a habit. And once that habit is not fulfilled, we are upset, just like my 6 years daughter. So we hardly, although we look like adult, 40 years, 50 years, 70 years, but we always remain an immature small child, because certain habits will always be there. So real maturity only happens when we realize the truth of who we are. We are not the human body. We are basically the power which enlivens this human body, because all the parts of the human body, sooner or later, the technology would be there to change them. So they are not ours. They can be changed, just like our car. You can replace the engine, you can replace the body, you can replace anything. So similarly, your heart can be replaced by some other heart. So you are not the human body. You are basically residing in this human body. And you get used to certain form of this thing because you can see them. You need the internal vision to see the power which enlivens you. The eyes will always deceive you. But that is why our science and invention is using different methods to find the truth, because eyes will hardly tell you the truth. Right?
I guess what you're saying is true. Again, usually you do speak the truth, but it's hard to think of
Habits.
the affection that that I show to somebody as being a habit, or the affection that they return to me as being a habit. It just seems to trivialize the power of that love to refer to it as a habit. I do agree we take it for granted because it's there and we do it. Interaction becomes very habit like, because it's something that we do and something we feel all the time and something that we're accustomed to. So it's much like getting dressed or driving to work or breathing, any of those kind of habits that we just do without thinking. But at the same time, it seems like it's so much more powerful, so much more important in terms of sharing love. Does what I say affect your thought at all on that? Do you think that
You
in
know,
some ways it's still a habit, or is it a most superior habit, at least?
see, what we call is love is not really love, because our entire psyche is driven by our five senses. And also, we are operating, our brain is being operated by this human body mode, which is infected. It's not infected. Basically, human body is designed so that it can take care of itself. It is vulnerable to pain and suffering. It can be destroyed. So that's why it remains in fear. It requires food. It remains in hunger. And it is always considered itself as a separate being. So it remains in ego, fear, insecurity. And if your brain thinking power is guided by this human body, so in this human body mode, what we call is love is our possession. What we call love is our security. What we call, that is why you have seen animosity in two brothers. There are many parents who do not talk to their children. There are so many divorces happening between two people who loved each other. So when this ego and fear and greed is not fulfilled by this relationship, we depart from it. I don't love you anymore, because it was always guided by our five senses. It is not the true love. True love can only happen by the real us. When the real us is in charge and operates our brain, it is totally different. You are completely secure because the real you never dies. The real you is only one force which is present in several billion, zillion, trillion entities, and you are not separate. You don't have any ego. So the real us, when it starts to guide the brain, it is only then and then we are going to find security, peace, and joy. Because so many times, so many books, so many lectures, so many religions have told us to be quiet, be peaceful. This is all going to temporarily there with you, and you don't own anything. All these great things have been taught to us, but they have always been received by the brain, which is run by our human body, our five senses. So we listen to it. We don't practice it because our habits are formed by our five senses. So no matter how many times we talk about this topic, unless our brain is operated by the real us, it is not going to give us peace and harmony. Ray?
I don't think you could have answered my question better. I mean, eloquence aside, just in terms of the foundational information you just gave there, in addition to the eloquence with which you presented it, to think that I'm so devastated by the loss, and we've all experienced this at some level with somebody in our life, to think that that really kind of was a habit in terms of what that relationship did for us, in terms of how it made us feel and how that enabled me to be able to do this and be able to do this because that person was there. And to realize that the core love that brought us together was because of the real them and the real us. And that is there forever. So the real love that was there, hopefully should have been there, didn't go away. The rest of it that went away was the habit of the relationship, the benefits of the two human people in suits being together. And we were very comfortable with that. We really enjoyed that. And it became probably the most important habit in our life to have that other person there. It's still, dramatic and a challenge, but it is, because habits are so powerful. But it is very empowering to know that the core love that should have been there, hopefully was there in that relationship, was what really made that love. And if that's what really created that ultimate bond that we miss so much, the reality is that that's still there, because the real us is still there, and the real us, the real them, is still there. So let's move on to the part that one of our guests suggested, because even in that scenario where it was just a habit, okay, and you're no longer trivializing that. You never were, but in my words, you were. If the real us is still there, but if we are having this relationship based on these really powerful, engaging, critically important habits, the one guest said that their experience has been to embrace the loss, embrace the sadness, not try to disregard it, not try to say you shouldn't feel bad about it. You can just get over it. You're strong enough to get by. You're just letting this bother you, and you shouldn't, because you should be able to ward off those thoughts. But to embrace that, because that is something we're supposed to experience for the benefit of changing us in a good way, for the benefit of making us more compassionate and more empathetic, for grounding us, maybe. If life has been really good to us, and we no longer value certain aspects of life, maybe it grounds us to realize the inevitability of loss, and reminds us of our own human fact that we're not going to be around forever. Do you agree with that? Do you agree that on the habit side, we need to embrace the fact that was a habit, and to accept it, and the acceptance of that helps us to become a better person while we're here?
When you're growing up as a child, and when you do something wrong, which is going to harm you, your parents say, no, 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 don't do that. Don't. If you are a 2-year old, you do not distinguish it in hot and cold. You are touching a hot stove, and your parents are telling you, no, 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 don't touch it, don't touch it. But as a child, you don't know any difference. So you end up touching that, and now it hurts. So now you know the difference between hot and cold. So similarly, in our nature, our bigger parent, which is the universal force, is constantly reminding us this is wrong. So all our troubles, all our difficulties are given to us to remind us, hey, wake up, realize who you are. But we are again parked in the same scenario. We keep on repeating the same mistakes, and we keep on getting the warnings. But we never change. Our entire life gets embedded, as we talked earlier, is being embedded in the childhood psychology. At 6 or 7, our character is formed, and we live our entire life based on that characteristics, basically embedded in 5 senses, basically embedded in fear, greed, and ego. So our basic earlier education has to be in self-knowledge, self-alignment, understanding the psychology of the universe. And then only we should be given what is called this worldly education, which is nothing but a tool to do things. But forming a basis is who you are, what the universal psychology is. And once that is given to us in the younger age, we will begin to understand who we are better than otherwise. We spend all our life debating these things. You know, Ratanjit and Ray are talking about these things, but let's be practical. Practical means let's live in our old habits. So that is what is going on, my friend. Ray?
Well, those last couple of words here caught me by surprise because they were so real. That's probably the biggest comment that I get when people just come up to me, strangers or friends alike or family alike, and they come back and say, "Yeah, I heard that, but it's just not practical." I listen to that and I buy into it, but it's just not the way it is. And so that's what I try to do is on the program here, I try to speak on their behalf to try to say, but I don't get it. I just don't see how this becomes relevant. This show today has been very empowering for me because I think I've not only been through some tragic losses of people in my life, but I've known other people that I've tried to guide through that process. And I don't think there's a bigger challenge for most people on earth than to go through this loss, a loss of a loved one. And so, you've laid out, I think, some real practical advice here today. I mean, it certainly has a spiritual basis to it, but it's also extremely practical in terms of separating what was our habit versus what was the real love that was that relationship. And if you do that with the underlying known that we're all going to be, nobody ever left this world, nobody ever came into this world and left it alive, is a not only a grounding reality, but it's also a empowering reality in terms of not fearing when that happens for all of us. Ratanjit, there's so much more. I want to get back, when we come back, into the psychology of the universe. What those aspects are of the power of the universe and how we should let those into our life. Because I think that's also part of the answer to how we cope with what's going on around us. The reality is, again, you talked about and our guest talked about acceptance of things that we can't change. And the universe tells us that, but we think we're smarter than the universe. So I want to come back and talk with that and maybe some other items before we close out today's show. We'll be back in just a moment. Okay, folks, I apologize for cutting you off there at the end, Professor, the last one, but we had to take that break. Is there anybody else that would like to share a quick thought with us here today?
I think a lot of trouble comes from this idea that we have control over outcomes. And the famous Indian text called the Bhagavad Gita, in its seminal stanza, says that all you control is what you do not control the outcome. And if we start, because I think in terms of practicality, there is always a step, like even in yogic meditation, there is this step called many to one. So mind goes in many directions. You have to fix it at one point, and then from 1 to 0, that's how they say it. But I think this idea that we control outcomes is very destructive to all relationships.
Thank you. Excellent. Anybody else? We have a few seconds left. Make sure you stick around with us. We will have a great conversation, I hope, based on your input immediately after the show. And we're about, we'll be about 8 minutes away from that point. We were done, but we have 15 more seconds. We're back on Stress-Free Living. Ray Samich with you and Ratanjit Sandhi today, talking about how we overcome problems even in the moment. You know, we know, and if you're just joining us or if you haven't been a part of our program over the last couple of weeks, we talked about how we should never give up despite the difficulties of life. We should not worry and regret the past because that does no good. We should not be fearful of the future because we can't change it, even if we worry about it and fear for it. We just live in the moment. But then today we're talking about, okay, that moment, what happens in that moment when we get tragic news? What happens in that moment when life goes terribly wrong, whether it's in our family, in our workplace, anywhere in our life, when something bad happens? How do we still overcome that challenge and make that less hard, if you will? Ratanjit, we've had such powerful, inspiring thoughts from you today and some from our listeners as well and viewers. You mentioned the psychology of the universe, to pay attention to that and to that if we just look around us, it'll guide us to understand what to do. And one of our guests just now said, you know, we can't control others. So that is maybe the part of the psychology of the universe. We can see that, you know, try as we might, we can't control what happens around us. We can only do our best and let the world and everything in this immense world, including the other people, live their life and do their thing. But we can control how we are affected, how we let it affect us. Is that part, is that a correct assumption that part of the psychology of the universe is to understand that we can only control us?
Psychology of the universe is a common thread which goes through everything. Because who made us? Our parents? Although we grew up in the womb of our mother, but she did not know how to make a baby. The natural forces, the universal forces made us, right?
Yeah.
So when we come on this earth, parents teach us values, and say the truth, and you always don't lie and don't steal and all those things. And we go to school, they repeat the same thing, and then in our society, our politicians make some laws, although some of the laws are just to make us play a favorable game, but all these are value system. But all those value systems are given to us. They are borrowed by us. They are not our true values. Our true values come from the universal psychology which has designed us. There are some laws which I have come across in my life, which I call the universal laws. So these are the universal laws of integrity, universal laws of values, universal law of purpose, universal law of acceptance, universal law of abundance, universal law of leadership, universal law of freedom, universal law of change, and universal law of grace. So now, what are these things? It will take another show to go through these things. Law of integrity means we can only have integrity when we literally become the one with the universal energy. We will not, integrity means you have to integrate with universal energy that already resides within us, making us alive and embedding us in the universal principles, values. It is only then we are in any position to do the right things when nobody is watching. We do the right things when somebody is watching. So when we are on stage, we speak the right language. Listen to the speeches delivered by politicians and our leaders. When we are in public, we behave. We only do the right things when somebody is watching. By embedding into the universal energy, we then are in a position to do the right things and nobody is watching, without any condition, expectation, rewards, or recognition. It is only integrity that gives us the courage, energy, sustainability, wisdom, and clarity to help us achieve sustainable success. And true.
Ratanjit, forgive me for interrupting, but we're just down to the last minute, okay? And I don't want to lose the impact of what you're saying. So forgive me for the interruption.
Right.
How does that integrity universal law tie into everything we've talked about? Why did you bring that up as a point? And what relation does that have to everything we've discussed?
Because it gives us clarity. It gives us the truth. You only integrate with the power within you. You become you. You don't act as what five senses of the human body dictates. Otherwise, you end up being slave of this human body, five senses. You only become free when you integrate with the universal one energy. And all these things greatly, what we talked about happens. Right?
Okay. With that, we need to say goodbye. Thank you, Ratanjit. I knew there was a reason you brought that up, and obviously there was a great one for it. Thanks for clearing that up at the end, and for all your other wonderful thoughts and love that you shared with us today. And thanks to all of you, wherever you may be, however you're viewing or watching or listening to this show, we value you, and we hope that we have added value to your life. Remember, we're all playing the same game. Talk to you again real soon. All right, we are clear. And now it's your turn, everybody. You've been very attentive and quiet. Now it's your turn to open up your microphones and share your thoughts and questions and ideas with us.
No, everything is fine, good. We should continue with it, and a lot of things are still left. We should touch all of them.
You mean all of the universal laws?
Yeah,
that
even
you talked about?
universal laws and how does they affect in living day to day and for every moment life.
All right, we will continue the conversation. Thank you. Who else?
Well, here's Doug again, and I just want to say I had no idea that a lot of this stuff was just habit. I definitely have bad and good habits, but I just wanted to say, for the moment, it's when you lose someone that's a friend, that initial moment, of course, is sad and everything, but as time goes on, at least in my case, I basically just remember the good times we had, the goodness of that person, and it's actually kind of a pleasant thoughts that goes through my mind to remembering friends that I've lost, and I've lost a few this last few years here. So didn't ever think of their friendship being a habit. But anyway, it's always interesting to hear Ratanjit explain this stuff. Thank you.
Thank you, Doug. Hi, you look like you're ready to say something. Welcome. I know you just joined us there at the end. Did you pick up enough of it? You want to share a thought with us? Yes, you.
Oh, hi.
It looks like you were ready to say something there. Hello, welcome. And I know you came in a little late, but maybe you still caught the idea of the show.
I did come in late. Hello, everyone. Hello, Ratanjit.
Hello.
I always enjoy a Saturday class, is what I call it.
She's the goddess of wisdom.
Huh?
You are the goddess of wisdom.
I don't know about all of that, but I know that I've learned a lot from you, and having experienced some of these turmoils, tragedies, experiences, challenges, whatever you want to call them, in the last several months myself. So many different challenges, but I'm so much better because of it. So I guess what I want to contribute, because there's so much that I've learned from Ratanjit as a student, but let me just share one thing that he taught me many years ago. He said, if you think of the worst thing that could ever happen to you, then it's already happened. So whether that's death or a loss of a family member, which I've had 2 sisters in the last 4 months, make a transition, just so many different things, some financial challenges, things that just didn't even make sense for my life, but it's a part of the experience. So what I understand about living is that suffering comes along with it. So if we don't look at suffering as something separate from it, but as a part of something that is essential for our soul's growth, like to really understand what our dharma is and to live in purpose, we've got to walk through the experiences without looking at it as bad or beautiful. It's just an experience. And what this has taught me the last year of my own personal challenges is the ability to live with beauty and pain at the same time and find them both equally as necessary and essential to me. to the betterment of who I am as a soul and my work on the planet.
Thank you. Thank you.
That's powerful. Thank you very much. Very much. Goddess of wisdom, you're right. Who else has a thought to share with us? Some of you we haven't heard from today yet. Anybody?
Paramji, you have some comments?
There are two things I wanted to say. Firstly, Kai, I think that was beautifully articulated. Thank you for your comments. Sometimes I hesitate to speak after listening to a very profound, talk like the one Ratanjit gives, because sometimes when we start talking about it, we dilute the depth of the wisdom and make it more of an intellectual experience. So sometimes just absorbing the depth of the wisdom in silence is very helpful. I want to talk about two quick things. One, I want to go back to the time a couple of years ago when Ratanjit comforted me in what I was going through that felt like an unbearable crisis. So I was married at that time, and on Valentine's Day weekend, my wife said she has never loved another human being as deeply as she has loved me. And she has never felt as deeply loved in her life as I have loved her. So that was Valentine's Day weekend. And 2 days later, she called me and said she's decided to divorce me because God spoke to her and told her to divorce me. So the shock of being reassured that I was loved so deeply and felt so deeply loved, and 48 hours, this 180-degree somersault was like being shot in the back. It was a tremendously unsettling experience. And of course, I turned to Ratanjit, and he said something that was enormously comforting. He said, you can either focus on the fact that she's gone, or you can focus on the 15 years that you both enjoyed together and feel gratitude for the fact that she was with you. Because had she not been with you for those 15 beautiful years, you would not be feeling the loss that you're feeling now. So it is an opportunity to light the candle of gratitude as opposed to continuing to fan the flames of this grief and loss. And that reframing has stayed with me very powerfully. And it's an example of how Ratanjit does not just talk, but he walks his talk, because a friend like me turns to him in a moment of immense need, and Ratanjit steps in and speaks with the depth of his heart and his soul in such a way that those words go deep into me. So that's something I just want to take this opportunity to thank Ratanjit personally for having made an enormous difference in my life. The second thing I wanted to say is I always remember the words of the Indian mystic Osho, who left behind a legacy of over 2,000 of books, his discourses. And one of the things that he would often remind people was to recognize that our mind creates opposites and polarities. So if you ask the mind what is the opposite of a peak, the dictionary will tell you that it's a valley. But in nature, Osho reminds us, peaks and valleys are not opposites, they're complementarities. Every peak leads to a valley and every valley leads to a peak. So it is with so many other things that we consider opposites. We say we want to be happy, we don't want to be sad. But the concept happy will not exist unless there's the concept of sad. Each of these states that we tend to celebrate depends upon its very existence, upon its precise opposite, the way, it is. So night and day are not opposite. Death and life are not opposite. Sadness and happiness are not opposite. So accepting the whole, and it comes to the oneness of it all, we rise, we transcend the world of polarizations, and we walk into the ocean of complementarities. Thank you.
Wow, beautiful.
Oh, we are getting such amazing wisdom from our guest here. Thank you. I'm just writing all this stuff down. I got to read it later.
But
And
wrong guy.
I must say,
to show with you.
I know all of these people. I must say something from what you also said there, Pram, is that, sometimes you're afraid to dilute the wisdom that comes from Ratanjit, or the power with with saying something else. And I feel that way too. And I just want to let, and we've lost a few of you here now already after the show, but I always struggle with that too, because when I try to paraphrase for what I think helps to make it more knowledgeable or more clear, I'm afraid that I dilute it because I lose some of the power of Ratanji's wisdom. And so I want to apologize if I do that sometimes, because Ratanji, I'm trying to make it more practical, more understandable, more clear, but I know sometimes I lose, some of that incredible power that's there. And it's it's a challenge, because sometimes it's just so out there. It appears to be so out there, but it isn't. It's so practical. I try to bring it to a practical standpoint. So if any of you catch me doing that, be my assistant here, my support, and come back and say, no, you didn't paraphrase that properly on a break, and tell me, so that we can go back and readdress something that maybe I've overlooked. Who else has a thought here that we haven't heard from that may want to share one before we leave today?
I'm sorry to be the one speaking again, Ray, but I have to tell you that I often...
Don't ever be sorry. Don't ever be sorry. We'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, I often tell Ratanjit that I'm just amazed by the clarity and succinctness with which you capture his thinking. I think the two of you do an enormous tango, a spiritual tango, very beautifully. And I don't think I was not thinking of you when I said that. I was thinking of my frailty, my vulnerability in wandering into the swamp of excessive intellectualization, because that's what you're trained to do as a professor, and then you lose the depth of it. I think the two of you are doing this show. It's like it's a masterpiece. Thank you.
You're very, very kind.
Without Ray,
very kind.
Nothing.
I was gonna
very kind on that. Except I don't know why you chose tango to talk about a dance, because I cannot dance at all. So it better be a spiritual tango, because if it was a physical one, nobody would watch, or they'd laugh. Maybe it would be good for a comedy. Anybody else have a thought?
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say that two things. The gentleman that just spoke, I think it was Param. It was so beautiful, everything that you said. And I think that what Saturday class is what I call it, because I actually do all my spiritual work on Saturdays, well, my own personal stuff, is so important and necessary if we live it. Two things I want to say to him, that what you said was so important. So never be afraid to speak the truth of what Ratanjit has been teaching us, because I know that for my organization, I have a nonprofit, and I base some of everything now on what he taught me about oneness. And it's helped me to be able to speak to people from a place of oneness, which now, even if I negotiate a contract or I'm writing a contract for someone else, my thought is always that everybody wins, not just that I win, but the other person wins as well. So even in these conversations, when we think about oneness, everything that you have to share is important, because your experiences are building on the building blocks of someone else's experiences. So same thing to you, Ray, not to be afraid to speak, because what he's really teaching us is fearless faith and focus. So if you take these things and you move them fearlessly, because it's integrity, which means you're operating from a truth, then there's no reason to be afraid. And operating from that truth gives you even more faith. And then the focus is to complete whatever that particular lesson, or maybe something you're teaching someone else, because it's always that dance of learning, teacher, learning, student, teacher, student, teacher. So I think that these Saturday classes are not just, it's like when people go to church. I look at this as a synagogue, church, temple, whatever you call it. It's the same thing to me, because you're getting information that you are actually supposed to become, right? So if you become these things, these principles, these disciplines, these core values, or these discipleship, meaning walking in spiritual discipleship to the universe, if you take on these qualities that Ratanji's been teaching for years, because I've had him in my life for 13, 14, 15 years already. I can't believe 2008, so that's 15 years. just so much that he's taught me that I experience in my real life. And I say that meaning my dream state or my spiritual life or my walking life. It's one thing once you accomplish the understanding of oneness. So never be afraid to speak, because your story, Mr. Param, I think was your name, it really, really touched me. So we're all very blessed to get this teaching, but I would certainly urge that we live it without fear and without trying to be perfect or without the ego, because then you'll find it's more true. When there's no ego, it's just true.
Beautiful again. Beautiful words.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
Actually, Ray, I have a question.
Oh, go ahead. Yes, Steve.
So one of our listeners, I can't remember which one, talked about how much it meant. I think it was the professor, to spend 3 months, I think is what he said, thinking about the loss, and that helped him get through it. Ratanjit said, enjoy the person and the years you had together. He also later said, I'm grateful for the years that we did have together. What do you think about that idea of mourning, or whatever you want to call it, for a few months before you move on? Just curious about that.
What do I think of?
I think he was asking Ratanjit, but anybody can join in.
Yeah, I was asking
Certainly.
Ratanjit, but specifically because that was asked of him earlier.
So, your old habit is going to force you to mourn, and life, it's okay. It's mourning and being happy are part of the same thing in one sense, as Param said. They are basically your old, you are going to definitely miss, even if you have a beautiful suit which always fitted you, and if you torn it and you can't wear it again, you will miss that suit. So it is normal to miss the human body experience, but unless you have the spiritual experience with the other person, your experience remains hollow. So when you see other person, see them as spiritual beings rather than just a human body, a spacesuit. So once that becomes a habit, you begin to have a totally different positive perspective on life.
Anybody else want to weigh in on that question? It's tough act to follow, Ratanjit, but you can do it if you like.
I guess I lost my two sisters in 4 months, so I can say something. One of them, we walked through brain cancer, and she finally transitioned end of June. And then I had a cousin who passed away, and so her service was 2 days before my sister. So I had one sister that passed in April. I don't know if I'm half Trinidadian on my father's side and Native American Indian or Indigenous Indian on my mother's. So there's different types of ceremonies that they do. But anyway, my half sister, the older sister, she passed in April. So between April and June, I had several losses. And for me, because they were so close, they were my sisters, but I actually was closer to my stepsister. My parents have been married 35 years, my dad and his daughter, and that's the one who had brain cancer. And so I had to walk with her with the joy on my face, but a heaviness of heart, because I didn't want her to be sad. But one day I came into her room at Cleveland Clinic, and she because it was brain cancer, she had the swelling, the tumors, and so sometimes her memory wasn't there. So I walked into her room, and she said she happened to be an administrator for Cleveland Clinic before she got sick, and so she kept saying that she worked there, but she kept saying she worked there as a nurse, and she kept saying that she She says, I like my job, but I don't like wiping their, I don't like the boo-boo. I don't want to call boo-boo. So we kept saying, what are you talking about? You're not. So she kept talking like she was a nurse or some type of assistant. So one day I walked in there this day. She said, you look so familiar. I said, I do? She said, yeah. She said, you look like, I said, who do I look like? She said, you look like my sister. I said, I do? I said, well, what's her name? She said, Micaela. I said, I am your sister. I am Micaela. She said, and she stared at me with this far, far away look. And she said, Micaela, you're so beautiful. You're so beautiful, Micaela. You're so beautiful. She said it about 7, 8, 10 times. She just kept saying it. But what I remembered was the look in her eyes, and it was as if she was looking around me, not directly at me. Now, I'm saying all of that to say that when she transitioned, that was the most important thing that she left with me, was how she saw me, the soul of who I am, the spirit of who I am, my energy and my aura, because that's what she was looking at. So for me, I focused on the beauty of the life that we shared and the time and the gift of love that I could give. And what it took me, I took away with it was that I can't stop anybody from physically transitioning. All I can do is transform. I can transform. So with those losses, Mr. Marsh, whatever losses they may be, just like Ratanjit has said today, and I didn't get an opportunity to hear everything. That's why I was a little reluctant to speak. But with those losses, there is so much of an amazing outcome, because the gratitude that we must feel for the idea that we even had the presence, that we could experience love like that with them. I'm so grateful through the tears and through the pain. And even now, I can be grateful because I can take that with me. She saw me as beautiful. So then I say, if she saw me as beautiful in her very last moment, then I am. And if I am, then I better be that to everyone all the time. Just be love and just be beauty. And no matter what anybody is showing me, I have to show them what she saw. So that's how it helped me a lot to take away and to be grateful for the life that I had and the lessons that I learned from all of them that I lost in this very short time.
That was beautiful. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So beautiful. Very, very wonderful words. Boy, you guys have been, this post show has been one of the best ever. Wonderful inspiration and wisdom from so many of you. Thank you. Ratanjit, thank you for an incredible show today. Very powerful, empowering.
Thank you.
All right. So we look forward to having all of you back with us again. Please join us, tell a friend, and we look forward to being with you again next week.